Hi, my name is Sam Johnson and I'm a voice teacher. Today I will be reacting to and analyzing Seungyoon performing Sunflower. So far, he's not using very much breath for anything. It's making it sound less supported. Some people really like the word supported. Supported's kind of a weird word because it makes sense if you know what it feels like, but it doesn't really make sense if you don't know what it feels like. But there's just not very much air pressure when he's doing that. It's a very flowy sound of air. There's not very much chord closure or resistance at the vocal fold level, and it just sounds almost uneven, almost wavery, but he's doing it for an emotional effect. Already, do you hear how much more clear his voice is from that versus the beginning part? That's that difference of even air pressure, even support, even resistance, whatever you want to call it. They're all connected, and so it's very common that people will use those words kind of interchangeably, because when you use those with students, it's really just like whichever one works for them. And sometimes it doesn't really matter which word you use as long as the student understands what that means. And so when I'm teaching, I generally like to make my students use the words that make more sense to them, and then I'll just try to follow along with whatever language patterns that they use. But it sounded a lot more connected, a lot more supported. He is breathing a lot, like very often, every measure or two. He could get away with not doing that if he just took bigger breaths, but he doesn't need to do that. Like, we don't always need to have really long phrases. It just is important to know what kind of picture that's painting. This is like a totally different sound than if he was taking larger breaths and just doing longer phrases. But it's important for the artist to try out all of those different things and make sure that you're getting the best thing that you want. It's your best sound, and it's communicating what you're trying to communicate the most effectively. So that's where making recordings and just experimenting a lot and seeing which one you connect to the best is. Pretty voice. He kind of used a little bit of twang when he went up to that higher note, the E, and that's the highest note that he's gone to so far in this, where everything before, it's been well below his bridges, but he still hasn't been like pressing into it. It's been a nice flowy sound. It hasn't sounded like, oh my gosh, the way that he's singing this beginning part is going to make it difficult to start singing high notes. So when he gets to that high note, he had just a little bit of a that kind of twangy sound. It wasn't as open and full as some people ask for, like an it had a little bit of this forward kind of sound to it, which I think is really helpful for getting up into those higher notes in a smooth way. You still hear a little bit of that twang, which is lovely. It's a really pretty sound. He's kind of putting a little bit of compression on just to make it sound more. It's lovely, but the beginning of it sounded a little compressed, which is just something to watch out for, because oftentimes if we get into too compressed of a sound, then it starts adding a bunch of additional strain that we don't really want, and it becomes difficult throughout a song. However, there is a minimum amount of compression that's needed, and that's where that word kind of fits in. The same with support and air pressure and all of those words that I just used earlier, where you need just a little bit of it to get everything to work. And the really good singers do have a little bit of this self-compression that keeps everything kind of even. So I think it sounded lovely. I also loved that he didn't blast that volume, that he started it a little bit softer and then he grew into a crescendo and then let the vibrato come in. It was pretty. Really good with his dynamics. Same thing right there. There was almost a little bit of vocal fry to get into that compressed sound. It's back at that E, which is probably right under or right on his first main bridge, his primo passaggio. And some people will say that for most guys it's around like that E flat to F sharp area. Some people, depending on how they were trained, will say that the primo passaggio is more at the A. I've heard it also more for just like bigger voiced people, that the A is kind of where we feel a little bit of a turn, and I noticed that in my voice as well, where if I can get through that A well, then I know that I'm going to be prepared to get to that like E bridge fairly well. But like the E1 is harder to balance for most people, and so it seems to be a place where most people spend a little bit more time to make sure that it's all worked out well. I think that his strategy of using that little creaky sound is lovely, because that little creaking, it just brings the chords together really gently. It doesn't have a ton of air pressure, but it has a little bit so that it doesn't sound super pressed. And yeah, he's just got nice relaxed vowels so far. So everything that he's doing is lining up to make it a repeatable, easy sound. The only question is like, is that sound good? And that's a subjective question. And subjectively, I think, yes, that does sound good. But I think that for most people, when you get a voice balance like his is, where we're not pressing into things, we're letting the air flow, we're getting good chord closure, we're having nice relaxed good vowels, like that's usually going to feel the best for the singer, and usually sounds that feel the best are going to sound the best. And so I get a lot of questions about like,
I don't like my sound, I don't know how to make my sound better.
And usually those questions come from a place of trying to make it a subjectively better sound. It's like someone has an idea of what aesthetic they want from their sound, and they're not making it, and they don't know how to do it. And I would really challenge you, if you kind of get caught up in that kind of a structure, that kind of a thought pattern, to instead start focusing on what am I doing that's making this more difficult. Try to address those things first, and then after singing starts feeling better and better, see if you like the sound more. If you don't like the sound and everything is perfect, at that point we just need to adjust those variables slightly to make the sound that you're creating match the style of music that you're trying to sing. And you can do that by adjusting how much of that compression you have, how much pressure you have. Like if you're singing a really heavy rock song compared to a very light pop song, that's a different level of air pressure that is kind of expected. And it's also a different set of vowels that's kind of expected. But, you know, don't jump into those little things. When you're first starting to sing, before you really have a good idea of what feels good and what you can control, focus on trying to get singing to feel really good. He's got a really pretty voice. I liked that longer breath too. He had a little bit more time between those two phrases, and so he used all of that time to breathe in. I also notice with a lot of people that they tend to kind of hold their breath at the end of a phrase. They'll da 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 da, and that gasping breath is not good for singing. It's much better to kind of have a nice lower, slower breath before it. So I really suggest using a breath in through your nose if you have enough time, or a breath in through your mouth, kind of as if you're breathing through a straw. Because when you breathe in like that, you feel everything just drop a little bit differently compared to if we just have the one beat and you are just gasping for it and it becomes more clavicular, a kind of breath. And it's possible to train having a quick breath that's also low, but I just like that when you have the opportunity, when you have enough time to do a longer breath like that, you do that. And so to me, that shows that he's reflexively breathing. He's not trying to hold his breath at the end and then just come in. Because yeah, we don't want to really hold the breath at any point. That's never really beneficial for singing. There's also just a different color that kind of happens when he starts pulling the microphone away, because he's actually singing with a microphone, and I think it's beautiful. I love seeing people sing live. I don't mind when people lip sync, but there's just more fun. So as soon as he started pulling it away, we got a little bit more of an echoey sound. It started being, there's just this natural reverb that happens when you start pulling away from the mic a little bit. And I think it's cool that he's using that to his advantage. It's like when he wants it to sound a little bit more like it sounds when it's close, he keeps it close. When he wants it to sound like that, when he's doing that, he kind of pulls it away. And it creates almost a diminuendo while maintaining some of the intensity. It's a really pretty sound, and it's a cool technique.
여러분들 이 노래 아시죠? 여러분들과 함께 불러보고 싶습니다. 제가 선창하면 같이 불러주세요. 1, 2, 3.
That time he started with a little bit more air coming through, so that's just changing up his onset. The onsets he's used before, he's used kind of a vocal fry onset, and that gives a different sound than when he kind of lets a little bit more air through. The way that we onset our phrases will affect how the rest of the phrase sounds, the overall tone quality to it. So I think that it's important to be able to control all of them, because there's nothing inherently wrong with any of them. Like a breathy, aspirate onset, like, that is fine as long as you don't do it like every single time. If we start doing that every single time, it generally results in too breathy of a tone, and too breathy of a tone generally isn't that balanced. If we start with just a strong glottal that has a lot of constriction every time, the same thing kind of happens in the reverse, where instead of having it too breathy, we tend to get too pressed of a sound, and then that builds a little too much tension. A neutral one is great. It's nice and neutral. That seems to be what most voice teachers will teach. Just a little bit more of that where we start the air and the muscle at the same time. And the vocal fry, I think, is a really lovely stylistic one that also just sets everything up super well. So I like to have my students do all of them. And so far I've heard him do pretty much all of them.
우리들의 사랑으로 어두운 곳에 손을 내밀어 밝혀주리라. 한 번 더.
I like that you can hear that one woman singing the octave higher than everything else, and her voice is super pingy. That's always fun. It's like the one person at church choir that always stands out a little bit more. Nice harmonies there too. Yeah, that's really good counterpoint. With that one, he did kind of let it go up into a very light head voice. If you want to call that falsetto, you could probably call that falsetto. To me, I don't have enough information to tell if that is falsetto. I think that it likely is connected because it doesn't sound super breathy, and I think that he's proven to me that he's skilled enough that I think that he'd be able to kind of transition that down seamlessly into his chest voice. But it also doesn't matter. Like, falsetto's not inherently bad, and if it was falsetto, who cares? It sounds lovely. That's where the subjectivity really comes into play, though. there's just a little bit of that. Ooh, lovely. Yeah, I like that he started that a little bit softer, and then he crescendoed into that higher note so that he wasn't pressing before he got into that higher note. So any additional press that happened because of the intensity of that moment, it didn't like push him over the edge to where it was totally strained. He had a nice open vowel. Lovely. That's so pretty. He kind of opened it to the kind of vowel shape, which works really well around that second bridge area. There's a moment where we need to just kind of open things up a little bit more. It didn't sound like it got too pressed. Like, listen to what I just did compared to what he just did. Mine was a little bit more pressed than what he did. Mine is probably not as repeatable as what he just did. But once you get used to what it feels like to not get super heavy through that area, you have a lot more availability for different vowel shapes, where maybe when we're first starting, we might need to narrow slightly in that place, but as soon as you get used to that feeling, you can open it up and that gives it kind of a brighter vowel sound. Yeah, I'm just staring at his jaw. It's really lovely. It just went back. It wasn't where it started jutting forward. Looking at the jaw, looking at the tongue, those are some places that very often hold extra tension. And if we can make sure that those places look like they're functioning super, like close to well, that usually feeds back so that the rest of the system doesn't have tension. Because it is a kinesthetic chain where if we have one part of that chain that gets a little bit tense, that will feed tension back to the rest of the chain. Yeah. Full growl. Yeah, like that one. The he kept everything a little bit tighter, and that's on the F sharp. So it is possible, obviously, to sing an F sharp with a closed down vowel shape, but it's going to start sounding a little bit more compressed. He just wanted that. So if we went from do you see how just opening the mouth automatically makes it sound less compressed? So for a lot of people who are training around that area, we don't want to start with that amount of compression. We want to start with more of that open, easy feeling, because that's kind of your middle ground, your best home base. And then we can kind of go away from home base for a second just to kind of get those effects. But we always want to know what that home base feels like, because it's a lot easier to do and it's more repeatable. Yeah, and he can hold that forever. There's like no extra air getting through that. And then he goes to a sound that he could not hold forever because there's a lot more air coming through. So I really challenge you to start listening to how much airiness it sounds like and how compressed it sounds, because if you are able to listen to that in other singers, in really good professional singers, then you'd be able to start recording yourself, listen to it for yourself, be like, well, I hear on this phrase, I'm running out of air and I can't figure out why I'm running out of air. Well, it sounds more like that second one than the first one. Okay, that probably is going to be why you're running out of air, because you're using way too much air through the phrase. Another thing to think of if that isn't the case is, are you breathing in deep enough, where it's kind of that longer breath, where you fill your gas tank more fully so that you have enough air to get through it. But we need to kind of address both things, making sure that you're getting enough air and that you're not hemorrhaging air as you're going through. Nice flip. That time I went to more of the... Yeah, that's more of the classical soprano kind of vowel shape, though. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It's so pretty.
미로 밝혀
Just that ending with that super delicate sound. He's a great singer. I love all of the colors in his voice. I love that he uses all of the colors in his voice and that it matches what he's doing with his face, because that shows that, you know, he's feeling this very intensely and he's letting those feelings dictate how he's going to use his voice. So he's not thinking about, okay, I'm going to adjust this and do this and this, whatever. He's practiced all that. He knows what it all feels like. He can kind of surrender to the emotion and just let it happen. Maybe there are some times when he checks in with his technique to make sure that everything is perfect, but like when you're at that level of singer, the more that you're in your head, the more you're going to start wrecking your performance. You just need to be thinking about what you're singing about, who you're singing to, why you're singing this, and let that lead everything. And that'll give a much better performance. It's going to feel a lot more holistic. It's just way better. So do that more. He sounds great. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below of any videos you'd like me to react to in the future. If you want to sign up for a lesson with me, there's a link in the description. If you want to listen to my podcast, there's a link in the description. If you want to join my Discord, link in the description. And if you want to follow me on social media, links in the description. Thank you.